While a man is risking his life and catching criminals so that his family can live in safety and prosperity, his wife is cheating on him. This is the most terrible thing that can happen, but you can't just leave it like that. I settled into my seat on the plane bound for home and watched out the window as the aircraft climbed into the sky. At last, after 30 long years, I was going home for good. I felt I owed it to myself and to my wife, Lisa. I pulled out the Zippo lighter I had carried all these years, a gift from her engraved with the words, "To my beloved husband, Alan. Congratulations, Marine." That's me, Alan Roberts, Gunnery Sergeant Alan Roberts, or Gunny Rob to the few I let get close to me over the years. After today, one more title would be added to that name. Retired. I had spent over 30 years in uniform, now decorated with ribbons and badges that meant more to me than anyone else. A little over a decade of that was in the reserves. I could honestly say I'd been there, done that, and collected all the T-shirts. I was already in uniform when Lisa and I got married so many years ago. We met by chance on the side of the road after work one day. I was working as a mechanic at a large auto dealership in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and on my way home when I saw her car pulled over with steam rising from the engine. I did what people around here do when they see someone in need. I stopped to help. It didn't hurt that she was easy on the eyes. One glance and I knew the issue: a broken fan belt. It was a simple fix. I quickly drove to the auto parts store down the road, grabbed the belt and some coolant, and had her car up and running in no time. "Thank you so much," she said. "I need to get back to Spokane, and I wasn't sure I'd make it. Is there anything I can do to repay you?" "Just get home safely," I replied. "No, really," she insisted. "Let me treat you to dinner. Do you like Red Lobster?" Why not, I thought. "I love Red Lobster," I said. She smiled, wrote down her name and number, and handed it to me. "Great," she said. "How about Friday night at 7 o'clock? "Sounds perfect," I said. We met that Friday and have been together ever since. After 8 months of dating, I proposed, and we got married. That was in 1987, and I've been a happy man ever since. She moved into my house in northern Idaho, even though it added over 30 miles to her daily commute. She was an elementary school teacher in Spokane Valley, just across the state line. We talked about buying a place closer to her work, but I was attached to my house, especially since it was paid off, situated on 5 acres of wooded land off Highway 95 north of Coeur d'Alene. My parents had built the house years ago, and I inherited it from them, along with a decent sum of money. I always hoped to one day pass it down to one of my children. Lisa was aware that my reserve duty required me to be gone 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks each year for training. She never complained, and the small checks I earned typically went into my IRA. Our first child, Renee, was born about 1.5 years after we got married. In 1990, when the cruel dictator Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, my unit was called to active duty. A little more than a year later, we returned home to a warm welcome, and our son Carl was born a year after that. Then September 11th happened, and everything changed. I was offered the chance to go on active duty, and I accepted. From that point on, we moved back and forth between Camp Pendleton in California and Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Lisa got certified to teach in both states, ensuring she always had a job wherever we were stationed. Over the years, I served 3 tours in Iraq and 3 more in Afghanistan, more than 6 years in total. On top of that, I was sent to Okinawa for year-long assignments 4 times. Each time I went, Lisa and the kids would move back to our home in Idaho, and she'd return to her teaching position in Spokane Valley. She never complained, bless her soul, but I knew it took a toll on her and the kids, and I felt guilty. 10 missed anniversaries, 10 missed birthdays, and 10 missed Christmases are tough on any family. When this latest tour came up, I promised her it would be my last. Now, at 56 years old, I felt that running around in the desert, dodging bullets, was a younger man's game. I had done my duty and it was time to go home. You're probably thinking that after more than 30 years of service, I should have retired at a higher rank, and you'd be right. In many ways, I was a typical Marine. I never chased after women, but I did enjoy drinking with my fellow Marines. My strong commitment to Semper Fidelis, always faithful, led me into trouble more than once when I stood up for my comrades, using my physical strength and a willingness to throw a punch when needed. As a result, I missed out on 2 promotions. But I never complained. In fact, I liked being a gunnery sergeant. Gunny was the go-to guy for everything, whether it was advice or tactics. I took great care of my Marines, officers and enlisted men alike, and earned their respect. That meant more to me than any of the medals or ribbons I wore. I thought back to my retirement party, where we shared sea stories and cracked salty jokes. Lieutenant Colum Reston, our battalion commander, came by to wish me well. I'd known him a long time. He was one of the officers who had demoted me years ago. I never held a grudge, and we became good friends. After giving me a commendation for my service, he shook my hand. "The Corps won't be the same without you, Gunny," he said with a smile. "Thanks, Colonel," I replied, smiling back, "but I think it's in good hands." Then Lance Corporal Dawson, a big kid from Georgia, came over with a few others, handing me something wrapped in brown paper. "Just a little something to remember us by, Gunny Rob," he said, grinning. I unwrapped it and couldn't help but laugh. Inside was a hand-carved wooden hand, flipping the middle finger, a nod to how many times I had jokingly done that over the years. Everyone, even the officers, knew it was just my way and never took offense. I turned it over and saw a Marine Corps emblem carved on the back, along with our unit's designation. "Did you make this yourself, Dawson?" I asked. He smiled and nodded. "Sure did, Gunny," he said proudly. "Great job," I said. "I'll cherish this forever, thank you." We shook hands as the other Marines around us cheered. I looked up at Staff Sergeant Joel Henson, the young Marine who would be taking over as Company Gunny. "Take good care of these Marines, Joel," I told him as we shook hands. "I will, Gunny, I promise," he replied with a smile. "Good. Because if you don't, I'll come back and kick your ass," I joked, laughing. That triggered another round of laughter and cheers. "Henson's a solid guy, Gunny Rob," said Captain Michaels, our company commander. "Of course, no one can truly replace you. Take care, Gunny. It's been an honor serving with you." We shook hands and said our farewells as the driver came in to inform me that all my gear was packed and ready for transport to the airport. As the plane began its descent, my thoughts returned to the present. I looked out the window and saw Spokane, Washington coming into view. I could spot the river, the falls, and Riverfront Park with its iconic pavilion, built for Expo 74. I'd brought Lisa and the kids here many times over the years to enjoy the summer days. Once the plane landed, we disembarked. I grabbed my sea bag and clothing bag and headed toward the exit, expecting to see Lisa. I had emailed and texted her with the flight details, so she knew when to pick me up. Normally, she would arrive hours early, just in case my flight landed ahead of schedule. But she wasn't there. This struck me as strange, so I texted her again. "At the airport." "Where are you?" When I received no response, I called her cell, but it went straight to voicemail. My worry grew. I called the house, but the answering machine picked up. Quietly, I prayed, God, please, let her be safe. I then called her parents, but they said they hadn't heard from her either. Do you need us to come pick you up? Her mother asked. Not yet, I replied. She might just be caught in traffic. I'll wait a bit, and if I can't find another ride, I'll call. No point in you driving all this way and then heading out to Athol. But if you hear from her, please have her give me a call. I will, Alan, she said before ending the call. Just then, a man's voice interrupted my thoughts. Need a ride, Gunny? He asked. I turned to see a tall, muscular man in khakis loading a suitcase into a white SUV. I was expecting my wife to be here by now, I said. Where you headed? He asked. Idaho, somewhere between Athol and Bayview off Highway 95, I answered. No problem, he said. I'm passing right through there and can give you a ride. Well, I thought, it's better than paying for a cab. Thanks, I said. I appreciate it. At least let me pay for your gas. He shook his head. No need, he replied. Company credit card covers it. Go ahead and toss your stuff in. I threw my sea bag and clothes into the SUV and got in. Home on leave? He asked as he settled into the driver's seat. Home for good, I said. 30 days of terminal leave, then officially retired after 30 years. That's a long time, he said. By the way, I'm John Sykes, he added, offering his hand. Alan Roberts, I replied, shaking his hand. Where are you coming from, he asked. The unit just returned from Afghanistan. I flew out of Camp Lejeune, I explained. Long day, huh? He commented. You can say that again, I said, pulling out my phone to text Lisa. Got a ride. No need to come. See you at home. So, what's next for you? He asked as we hit the road. Not much. Fishing, hunting, and chasing the wife around the house, I joked. He chuckled. Yeah, I get it, he said. I did 25 years in the Army, retired as a lieutenant colonel. Trust me, retirement isn't as great as it sounds. What do you do now? I asked. I run a men's camp up in northern Idaho, he said. Really? I replied. I've lived in Idaho my whole life and never heard of a men's camp. When did that start? It's been around for about 10 years, he said. No offense, but I wouldn't expect you to know about it. We chose Idaho to keep it away from curious eyes. What kind of camp is it? I asked. It's a place where men can deal with personal issues, he said. Oh? I asked. What sort of issues? Well, let me put it this way, he said. You've seen combat, right? Ever had a Marine or soldier get a Dear John letter from home? More than once, I said. Then you know how devastating it is for a man to find out his wife's been unfaithful, he said. Only too well, I replied. We help men get through situations like that, he said. The difference is that most of these men have never had the advantage of military training like we have. In fact, a lot of the men who come to my camp are nearly afraid of their own shadow. Wow, I responded. So how do you help them? First, we build them up physically, he explained. Then we focus on their mental and emotional well-being, and we offer any legal services they need to handle whatever challenges they're dealing with. That sounds like a lot, I remarked. How long do they stay at your camp? The typical program lasts 3 months, he replied. It's very intense, similar to basic training. Sure sounds like it, I agreed. Ever worked as a drill instructor? He asked. Yes, I answered. I had a successful tour at Parris Island, South Carolina. I went in as a sergeant and got promoted to staff sergeant by the end. Then you're familiar with the methods we use, he said. I was impressed and intrigued by what he was describing. Actually, I've been authorized to bring in a new senior instructor, someone to manage the other instructors, welcome the new recruits, and oversee the curriculum. Interested?" "I have to admit, it sounds intriguing," I said. "I'm starting to think our meeting wasn't just by chance." He smiled. "You're very perceptive, Alan," he replied. "I won't lie to you. You're too sharp for that. The company's been keeping an eye on you for a while now." "Me?" I asked, surprised. "Why me?" "For starters, you're local, a recent combat veteran with a solid record, aside from a few bar fights," he said with a grin. "Silver Star, Bronze Star, Meritorious Service Award, 4 Purple Hearts, Combat Action Ribbon, Navy Achievement Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, Navy Marine Corps Medal, Good Conduct Medal. Even with the bar fights, you're exactly what our program needs. More importantly, you're exactly what our students need." "And you say your company's been watching me?" I asked, feeling a bit uneasy. "Yes," he confirmed. "We've just been waiting for you to file your retirement paperwork. It's a job designed for someone like you. The pay and benefits are much better than what you had in the Corps, and you'd only report to me." "That sounds promising," I said. "But I sense there's a catch." He nodded. "You're right," he said, handing me a manila folder from the seat next to him. "There's one issue you need to resolve first. Go ahead, take a look." I opened the folder to find a neatly typed report detailing the activities of Lisa Roberts, my wife, and a man named Elroy McEnroe, the principal at the school where she works. My heart sank when I read this report. According to him, Lisa had been in a relationship with this man for more than 20 years, and often met with him when I was not at home. The photos made the situation even worse. They depicted her interactions with him. I noticed a DVD in the envelope and thought with horror about what might be there. "Where did you get all this?" I asked. "I'm not going to belittle your intelligence, Alan," he replied. "The company decided to conduct a background check after I recommended you for this position. For obvious reasons, this included exploring your family life. I suppose you had no idea this was happening." I shook my head, completely stunned by what I saw. "No, I had no idea," I said. "How do you know that this has been going on for 25 years?" "The investigators we have hired are working at the highest level," he said. "They use the most advanced surveillance equipment. If there is something to discover, they will find it. They gathered this information from conversations between your wife and Mr. McEnroe. It's obvious that your wife has been working hard to hide this from you all these years. That explained all the time she spent here while I was abroad. It also meant that she had spent half of the last 20 years with Elroy. Heck. A terrible thought occurred to me. "What about the children?" I asked. "That's the only good news in all of this," he said. "They're both yours." "How do you know?" I asked. "As I mentioned, our investigators are the best," he replied. "They took DNA samples from your children and compared them with the DNA that the military has in your file. The results matched." "I have a feeling that you knew she wouldn't be at the airport to meet me," I said. He nodded. "That's right," he confirmed. "The investigators found out that they usually meet after school. Once a week, she drives him to your house, they go about their business, and then she drives him back to the car so he can return home. They've been following this routine since you've been away. And tonight is one of those nights when they go to your house." "Damn," I muttered. "She traveled 70 miles back and forth just for this. How could she do that?" I asked. John just shrugged his shoulders. "It happens," he said. "Long deployments, time away from family. You come back from war, changed in ways you don't even realize. It can put a lot of pressure on even the strongest marriages. The real question is, what will you do about it? If it's all true, I'll have no choice but to divorce her, I said. John nodded in agreement. Yeah, I agree, he said. What about the guy? Good question, I replied. I'd like to skin him alive, but I don't feel like going to prison. I'll figure something out. Everything you need is in the report, John said. He's married with 2 kids. His wife, by the way, doesn't know about the affair with Lisa. You're sure this info is accurate? I asked. He nodded. Absolutely, he said. If I had any doubts, I wouldn't have brought it to you. I'm really sorry, Gunny. You're a good guy and you don't deserve this. Who does? I asked. Fair point, John said. We reached the turnoff to my place, and John drove down the narrow paved road. A few minutes later, we pulled into my driveway. You're really out in the sticks, he said, navigating down the drive and stopping in front of my house. Nice place you've got. Thanks, I said. My parents built it with their own hands. I had hoped Lisa and I would retire here. Looks like it'll just be me now, at least for a while. John turned to me. Listen, Alan, he said, handing me a card. Call me when you're ready. Come by the camp. We can talk if you need to, and we have counselors to help if you feel like it. I'll introduce you to the guys and give you a tour so you can see what we do. I think it'll help you make up your mind. Feel free to wear your uniform if you like. I'm serious about the job, but first, you need to handle this, he said, nodding towards the manila envelope. I nodded in understanding. Thanks, John, I said. For the ride, the offer, everything. I'll take care of it. I'll be in touch. We shook hands, and I got out of the SUV, grabbing my sea bag and clothing bag. John turned around and drove off as I made my way to the front door. I took my things to the master bedroom and put everything back in its place, still reeling from John's words. The room was spotlessly clean, as Lisa always liked it. I thought that maybe she was unfaithful, but at least she kept the house in order. When everything was cleaned up, I changed my uniform to jeans and a t-shirt. Grabbing a manila folder, I headed downstairs. I needed to see what else was in that report. I took out the DVD and put it in the player. Turning on the TV, I started the disc. Lisa and Elroy appeared on the screen in what looked like a motel room. It didn't take him long to finish, and soon they were cuddling on the bed. And that was it? Really? There had to be something else. I could hear them talking, but I couldn't make out their words, so I rewound the video a bit and turned up the volume. What I heard shocked me. God, she whispered. You're perfect for me. Yes. Better than your husband, he replied. Much better, she said. It hurts me to be with him. I thought you liked that kind of thing, he said. Most women like it. Well, I'm not one of the most women, she replied. I felt a wave of nausea. Trust me, Alan could be a model for toxic masculinity, she said. So when are you going to leave him? He asked. I'm not sure, probably not before he retires, she said. If you play your cards right, you can get half of his retirement funds, as well as a significant portion of his savings and 401k, Elroy suggested. That was her plan. Fortunately, I had a prenuptial agreement that she signed when we first got married. My father prepared it for me before he died. All I had to do was add her name. His main concern was protecting the house and the inheritance he left me. I've heard enough and picked up the phone book. It was still well past noon, so I called and made an appointment with a family lawyer the next morning. I went upstairs, packed some of her things, and left the bags by the door. Well, to hell with it, I thought. If she wants to leave, I'll let her go. After that, I sat on the couch, thinking about my life with Lisa. As far as I knew, everything was fine between us. Of course, we had typical problems that every couple faces, but we always managed to cope with them. I always imagined that if she ever cheated on me, it would be with someone much more imposing. Perhaps someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger and John Holmes. This thought made me laugh out loud. In all the years we've been together, I had no idea that our closeness could hurt her. She never mentioned it. In fact, I was always amazed and impressed that she remained faithful, even after the birth of our children. I went to my office and opened the closet where I kept my indoor tools. There, on the shelf, was an unopened package of duct tape with 2 rolls inside. An idea began to form in my head. I grabbed the duct tape and a pack of ties, then closed the closet. I went to the gun cabinet, unlocked it, and took out a .45 caliber pistol. After making sure everything was unloaded, I returned to the dining room, put everything on the table, made a sandwich, took a beer, and sat down, waiting for them to come. It was already getting dark when I heard a car pull into the garage. A few minutes later, I heard them laughing and talking when Lisa opened the door. They didn't notice that I was sitting at the table until they entered the main part of the house. Lisa's eyes widened in surprise when she saw me there. "Alan," she exclaimed, "when did you arrive? Didn't you get my emails and text messages?" I asked. "I'm sorry, my phone is dead," she replied. "But Alan, I swear, everything is not as it seems." "Really?" I said. "Are you saying that it's not you and Elroy who are going to have fun in our bed?" Elroy moved toward me and I grabbed my gun. He froze. His eyes widened, and his face paled even more. I twisted the shutter for extra effect and put it back in place. There were no bullets in the chamber. Hell, I didn't even have a magazine in this thing. But they didn't know that. "Oh my God," he said. "Please don't shoot me." I saw a wet stain spreading on the front of his trousers, and I couldn't help but smile. The guy was clearly scared. "Shut up, you idiot," I said. "Do you really think you can mess with another man's wife for more than 20 years and get away with it? No way. Now take off your trousers." "What?" he stammered. "Do you want me to take off my pants? Right here? Weren't you planning on doing this anyway?" I asked. "Now do it, damn it, move!" He jumped up and started doing it. Lisa looked at me in horror. "What are you going to do?" "What is it?" she asked. "Are you going to hurt us?" "Have I ever hurt you in all the years that you've known me?" I asked. She shook her head. Elroy, in my opinion, was moving too slowly, so I pushed him forward. "Stop fooling around," I snapped. "Do it faster. Move it." He was left in his underwear. "I've said it all," I screamed. Standing there, he awkwardly tried to cover himself. "Oh my God," I said, laughing. "Are you really pathetic?" Trembling, he nodded. "I think so," he muttered. "Okay," I said, brandishing the gun. "Outside." I handed Lisa 2 rolls of duct tape and motioned for her to follow me. "Move." They headed for the door, glancing nervously at me. I grabbed a few ties and followed them. Elroy tried his best to walk around the yard barefoot, but I didn't care. I led them to a tree at the edge of the yard. "Stand by the tree," I ordered. "The back is straight." By the time she finished, Elroy was bound to the tree, wrapped in layers of duct tape like a cocoon. Only his eyes and nose were visible, darting around in fear. I approached him, making sure he was completely immobilized. Then I looked him in the eye, smiled, and pulled out my phone. I dialed his home number, which I had thanks to the report John had given me. "McEnroe residence, Judy speaking." A woman's voice answered on the other end. "Mrs. McEnroe, this is Alan Roberts," I said. "Is your husband Elroy available?" No, he's in a meeting with the teachers at his school," she replied. "Can I take a message for him to call you back?" "That won't be necessary, Mrs. McEnroe, but thank you," I responded. "I apologize for the deception, but the truth is, your husband is at my house with my wife, and I think you should come pick him up." I watched as Elroy's eyes widened even more beneath the tape. "What is he doing in your house with your wife?" Judy asked. "They were going to sleep together, but things didn't go as planned," I replied. "What?" Judy screamed. "Are you serious? Is this some kind of stupid joke?" "No, ma'am," I said. "This is not a joke. They have been having an affair for over 20 years. "That jerk!" she screamed. "I'm going to beat the crap out of him. You can be sure that I will come for him. Where exactly are you?" "In Idaho, east of Athol, off Highway 95, I said. "I'll send you instructions." "Thank you, Mr. Roberts," she said. "I'll come as soon as I can." After the conversation ended, I sent her a text message telling her how to get to my house, then turned to look at Elroy, who seemed even more scared. "I'm going to talk to my wife if you don't mind," I told him. He tried to shake his head, but the tape over his mouth made it impossible. I motioned for Lisa to come inside. She left and I followed her. Once inside, I motioned for her to sit on the couch, then picked up the remote control for the TV and DVD player. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "And before you say anything, keep in mind that I know a lot more than you realize." "It's been going on for a while," she answered softly. "A while?" I repeated. "What does that mean? A month? A year? 10 years? 20? Even longer?" "Longer," she admitted, looking down. "Longer?" I echoed. "I see. When did it begin?" "Around 1995, she said. "We worked together for years and never did anything when you were home. It only happened when you were away." "Even all those times I was deployed overseas?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes," she replied. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. You were never supposed to find out. So while I was fighting bandits, risking my life, you were here and slept with him in our bed?" I asked. She started to cry. "Cut the tears," I told her. "Just answer the question." She wiped her eyes and nodded. "Yes," she pleaded. "Please, we can move past this. Can't you give me another chance?" "Move past this?" I responded. "Are you serious right now? You expect me to just overlook your cheating? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't throw you out right this second." "This doesn't have to ruin us," she insisted. "I don't want a divorce." But I knew she was lying. I'd overheard what she told Elroy. "It's too late for that," I said coldly. "I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow." She glared at me, defiant. "You don't want to do that," she warned. "Elroy said if you try to divorce me, I can take half of your retirement, the house, and everything else." I laughed and held up the prenuptial agreement. "There's one problem," I said. "Remember the prenup you signed years ago? Well, it's still valid and bulletproof. You won't get a thing if I have anything to say about it. The house is mine. My parents left it to me. And the prenup is crystal clear about what happens if one of us cheats. Don't worry, I'll stick to it exactly. You'll get 40% of our joint savings, but no support. And I keep every bit of my retirement. I'll fight you on this," she challenged. "I thought you might," I said, picking up the remote and pointing it at the TV. I pressed play, and footage of her with Elroy filled the screen. Her face went pale, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God," she gasped. "How did you get that?" "Please turn it off." I shook my head. "It doesn't matter how I got it," I said. "What matters is what your school board will do when they see it." Her eyes widened in horror. "I'd lose my job," she said, trembling. "So would Elroy. Please don't do this." "Will you sign the papers when you receive them?" I asked. She nodded, looking defeated. I turned up the volume of the video and scrolled it to the point where she complained that I wasn't right for her. "Can you explain this to me?" I asked. "After all these years together, you haven't mentioned it once. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "I didn't want to hurt your feelings," she replied. "And that's when you started making excuses to avoid intimacy?" I asked. She nodded. "Yes," she admitted. "I'm sorry." "Yes, you've already said that," I replied. I reached into her purse and took out her keys, taking out the house keys as well. Then I pulled out her wallet and took the ATM card along with our shared credit card. I left her STCU card there, knowing that she had an account with the Spokane Teachers Credit Union, and she regularly transferred 10% of her salary to this account. If she needed money, she could use it. I threw my purse back on the couch. "Then maybe I should pack up and leave," she said quietly. "Not now," I told her. "You still need to explain something. You need to tell your parents and our children about what you've done so that they understand why we're getting divorced." "Please don't make me do this," she pleaded with tears in her eyes. "Why not?" I asked. "It seems like you haven't had any problems cheating on me for 20 years. Are you ashamed now? They're going to hate me, I just know it." She sobbed. "I'm sorry," I said, picking up the phone. I was about to call her parents when I saw the headlights coming into the driveway. It was probably Judy, who had come to pick up her husband. "Oh, it looks like Judy is here. You can start by explaining to her why you slept with her husband." A minute later, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a woman who seemed slightly younger than me, with a curvy figure. She looked quite attractive and wore her ripped denim jeans well. I couldn't help but notice that she was checking me out even more than I was looking at her. "Yes?" I asked. "Are you Ellen Roberts?" she asked, her gaze briefly dropping to my crotch. "Yes. And you must be Judy McEnroe," I replied. "For now, yes," she said. "Please, come in," I offered, opening the door wider. "So where's that slimy bastard hiding?" she asked, and I couldn't help but smile. I liked her right away. "He's a little tied up at the moment," I said. "But don't worry, he's not going anywhere." Judy turned to look at Lisa, and her face turned red with fury. "So you're the one screwing my soon-to-be ex-husband," she said, her eyes going wide as she recognized my wife. "Oh my God, it's you, Lisa Conroy. I should have guessed." She stormed over to Lisa and slapped her hard across the face. Lisa stumbled back as Judy hit her again. "You bit! You always stole my boyfriends in high school and now you're sleeping with my husband?" "Please stop," Lisa cried. "Shut up, you girl of easy virtue," Judy yelled. "I ought to knock you into next week. How could you do this? You're married to this gorgeous guy and you cheat on him with the Pillsbury Doughboy. What the hell are you thinking?" She paused long enough to look at me. "Where's that scumbag?" she demanded. "I'll take you to him," I said. "Wait here." I went into my office and opened the cabinet where I kept the duct tape. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for: a box cutter, a bottle of 90% isopropyl alcohol, and an old t-shirt I'd been using as a rag. I returned to the front room and gestured for Judy to follow me. We went outside, and I pointed to the tree to which I had tied Elroy. Judy burst out laughing when she saw that he was tightly wrapped in duct tape. Elroy didn't seem too happy to see his wife, and I noticed the fear in his eyes. "I like your approach, Alan," she said. "It will take forever to get him out of this state." I shook my head, putting the alcohol and the cloth on the ground. "No, that's not going to happen," I replied. She raised her hand. "Wait a second," she said, walking up to Elroy. She looked into his eyes for a moment before hitting him. "You're a jerk," she spat, taking off her rings and throwing them on the ground before hitting him again. "You haven't touched me in months, and now I know why. You were with that girl of easy virtue." At that moment I realized that I didn't want this woman to be mad at me. "Are you done?" I asked. She glanced at me, her eyes still filled with rage. "I'm just getting started," she said. "But if you want, go ahead and untie him. I won't mind if you accidentally hurt him." I took out a stationery knife and cut the tape between his body and the tree. Then I took a step back and looked at Judy. "You can rip it all off at once if you want," I said. "Think of it as a hillbilly version of full-body hair removal." Her face lit up with a smile when she realized what I meant, and dimples appeared on her cheeks. "I know exactly what you mean," she said, looking back at Elroy. "I hope you like being in pain," she told him. Grabbing the edge of the cut ribbon, she tore off all this mess with one movement, pulling out a lot of hair. He screamed in pain as the tape came off his skin. Once freed from the tape, Elroy collapsed to the ground, writhing in pain. I could see where the tape had ripped out chunks of body hair, so I grabbed a bottle of alcohol and a rag. Soaking the rag, I began applying it to his skin. His screams grew even louder as the pain intensified. "Don't be a baby," I said to him. "I'm just making sure you don't get an infection." Judy chuckled as Elroy squirmed in agony. "All right, get up," I ordered. "Get inside the house." Still zip-tied with his hands behind his back, Elroy scrambled to his feet and ran toward the house, completely knack-d. "That was the most fun I've had with him in years," Judy remarked as she watched Elroy stumble into the house. We followed him inside, and I cut the zip ties, freeing his hands. I tossed his clothes at him. "Get dressed," I commanded. He hurriedly put on his clothes as I turned to Lisa. "You've got more calls to make," I told her. "Please, haven't you done enough?" she pleaded. "No," I replied. "Call your mother and put her on speaker." Trembling, Lisa dialed her parents. "Hello," her mother answered. "Mom," Lisa sobbed. "It's me, Lisa." "Lisa," her mother responded. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "Mom, Alan is kicking me out," Lisa wept. "Why would he do that?" her mother asked. "He found out. I've been cheating on him," Lisa admitted through her tears. "You did what?" her mother snapped, clearly furious. "You idiot! How could you do that to your husband? I thought I raised you better. What's wrong with you? No wonder he's throwing you out." "Mom, please, can I stay with you for a little while?" Lisa asked. "I suppose, but not for long," her mother replied. "And no men. Understand?" "Thanks, Mom," Lisa said softly. "Is Alan there?" her mother asked. "Yes, I'm here, Mom," I responded. I'd always liked Lisa's parents and had called them Mom and Dad ever since we got married. "Are you all right, son?" she asked. "I'll get through it, Mom," I said. "It won't be easy, but I'll be okay." "I'm really sorry, Alan," said Lisa's mother. "You've always treated her so well. I don't know what she was thinking. Please don't lose touch." "I won't, thanks," I replied before the call ended. I turned to Lisa. "You still have 2 more calls to make. Get to it." "Please, don't make me do this," she cried. "Why not?" I asked. "They deserve to know the truth. Get going." Trembling, Lisa picked up the phone and called our son, Carl. "Hello?" he answered. "Hey, Carl," Lisa began. "It's Mom." "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked. "No," she replied. "Your father and I are getting a divorce." "What?" he said in disbelief. "Did Dad cheat on you or something?" "No, Carl, I cheated on your father and he found out," Lisa admitted, "How could you, Mom?" he asked, stunned. "Is Dad there?" "I'm here, son," I said. "Before you ask, I'm fine. But I thought you should know the truth. Your mother has been doing this for over 20 years, and I just discovered it today." "Oh my God, Dad," he said. "I'm really sorry to hear that." "I'm so sorry, Carl," Lisa said. "Yeah, sorry you got caught," he replied. "Mom, I can't believe you'd do this to Dad. I've got to go. I'll talk to you later. Bye." He hung up, and Lisa broke down, crying on the couch. "One more call," I said. Lisa glanced up at me, her eyes swollen from tears. "Please, I'm begging you," she said. "No more." "One more," I insisted. "Do it." Shaking, Lisa dialed our daughter. The conversation went similarly to the one with Carl, except Renee was even more upset. "You stupid, selfish idiot," Renee shouted when Lisa told her what happened. "I hope Dad throws you out." "He is," Lisa responded. "How could you be so unbelievably stupid?" Renee asked. "You're not my mother. I don't even know who you are. Get your act together, or you'll never see your grandchildren again. Don't ever call me." "Goodbye." Renee hung up, leaving Lisa sobbing uncontrollably on the couch. "Are you starting to realize the consequences of your actions?" I asked. "You have completely destroyed 2 families with your selfishness. I hope you're proud of yourself." Lisa wiped away her tears when I spoke to her. "I told you. I'm sorry," she said. "Now everyone hates me." "Well, every action has consequences," I said. "It's time for you to leave. I've already packed your toiletries and some of your personal belongings. You can come back later for the rest of the stuff." Lisa nodded, went upstairs to get my suitcase and travel bag, which I left at the bedroom door, and went back down. Judy stopped her when she was about to leave. "Wait a second," Judy said. "Did I hear you correctly? Have you been sleeping with my husband for more than 20 years? Lisa lowered her eyes shyly. "Yes," she said softly. "Well, then I guess you won't mind if I sleep with your husband," Judy said. "It's been a long time since I've been with a real man, and your husband seems to be well off." Judy looked at me. "What do you think about it? Do you want revenge?" Lisa dropped the suitcase she was holding and stared at us. "You wouldn't do that, would you?" "What is it?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Please tell me you wouldn't do that." "I do not know," I replied. "This is the best offer I've received in a while. Why should all the fun go to scammers?" Judy laughed. "I don't think I have anything to complain about," Lisa said. "No, you really can't," Judy snapped. "And don't forget to take out the trash," she added, grabbing Elroy by the collar. She stared at him intently before speaking again. "Don't go back to the house. I don't care where you stay, whether you sleep in your car or rent a motel. I never want to see you again. I'll talk to a lawyer tomorrow. Understood?" He nodded weakly. "I get it," he said, heading for the door. Lisa took one last look at me. "I'm truly sorry, Alan," she said, "for everything. Goodbye." With that, she turned and walked out of the house and out of my life. We watched as Lisa drove away down the driveway and turned onto the main road. I felt a tear well up and quickly wiped my eyes. Judy glanced at me. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Yeah, just got something in my eye," I replied. She smiled softly. "Yeah, right," she said with a smirk. I chuckled. "How do you just walk away from 30 years of marriage?" I asked. "By being open to new possibilities," she answered. I nodded. "You really had no clue about any of this, did you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just found out today. She only did it while I was deployed. What about you? Did you know what he was up to?" "I had my suspicions," she admitted. "I could smell her perfume on him and his clothes. But I never actually caught him. I just kept quiet and hoped he'd change. "So, what are you going to do now?" I asked. "I'm not sure," she said with a sigh. "I've always been a stay-at-home wife and mother. That's all I ever wanted." My mom raised me a bit old-fashioned, telling me the best job a woman could have was being a homemaker. I got married right out of high school and never had a paying job. All I ever wanted was to make my husband happy and raise my kids the best I could. But I'll figure it out. I nodded. I had no doubt she'd land on her feet. "Did you really mean what you said earlier?" I asked. "About intimacy and everything else?" She laughed. "Stay here a little longer, cowboy, and you'll understand that I'm saying what I think, and I mean what I say," she replied. "Would you like to stay the night?" I asked. "Do you mind?" she replied. "I'd love to keep you company," I said. "I think I wouldn't mind either," she replied. "Is it okay if I take a quick look in your bathroom?" I didn't take anything with me. "Of course," I said. "Go ahead." I explained the way to her and watched her go upstairs to the master bathroom. About half an hour later, she came down wearing only one of my old red marine t-shirts. She looked at me and smiled. "I borrowed one of your t-shirts," she said. "I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," I replied. "I also used one of your wife's razors," she added. I was fascinated by the sight of her. After a few moments, I was touching her, fascinated by the smoothness of her skin. All this quickly turned into something more. We were close. It was incredible. Our eyes met and we held our breath. It struck me that, apart from Lisa, she was the only woman I was in bed with. I think she realized that, too. We both needed it, but I couldn't help but wonder if I was making a mistake. As good as it was, did I really want to have a relationship with someone else on the very day I kicked out my unfaithful wife? "Thank you," I said. She smiled and put her arms around my neck. "It was the first time I had fun, the first time in my life," she said. "Really?" I asked in surprise. She nodded. "Yes," she replied. "It's not like Elroy didn't try. He did. I even managed to get pregnant with him a couple of times. Sometimes I wonder how he did it." "You've seen him?" "Yes," I said. "And what did you do?" "I've learned to pretend," she said. "Then I learned to take care of myself," she added, raising her hands. I understood what she meant. "So why did you stay with him?" I asked. "Believe it or not, I really loved him," she said. "Once upon a time. He was a good man, took care of me and the children. You loved your wife too, didn't you?" "Yes, it is," I said, "and probably a part of me will always do that. But I'm not going to put up with her cheating." "I feel the same way," she said. "As for me, my marriage is over. I kept my vows, but the moment he broke them, it was over." "And now what?" I asked. "You mean us?" "What is it?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "I've never been a one-night stand, and I'm too old to start dating again." "Is this your way of saying that you like me and you want to keep dating me?" "What is it?" she asked. "I think so," I replied. "Well," she began, "I like you too, Alan Roberts, and I really don't want this to be just a one-time act of revenge. If you don't mind, I'd like to see where this leads." "I would like that too," I replied. She smiled and kissed me. "Okay," she said, "but there is one thing." "What is it?" I asked. "If you ever cheat on me, I'll get back at you," she said with a smirk. I laughed out loud. "How about going upstairs?" "Lead the way," she said. We went upstairs and made love a few more times before falling asleep in each other's arms. When I woke up the next morning, I found her. "Good morning, my love." she said with a smile. Do you want to have breakfast? I'd love to, I said. She got up and dressed. Great, she said. I'll make breakfast downstairs while you get dressed. I've already made coffee. What are your plans for the day? I have a meeting with a lawyer this morning, then I'm going to discuss a job opportunity, I said. And you? After breakfast, I will go home, and then I will arrange an appointment with a lawyer myself, she replied. See you downstairs, she added before leaving. I went to the bathroom, did my morning chores, then took a shower. I decided to put on my Class C uniform, got dressed, made sure everything was in order, and went downstairs. Judy's eyes widened when she saw me. Are you in the Army or something? She inquired. Marine Corps, I replied, at least for another month. I'm on terminal leave, waiting to retire. She examined the ribbons and badges on my chest. What are all those for? She asked. Various things, I answered. For instance, this one indicates I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. More than once, I said, pointing to the Purple Heart ribbon with 3 stars attached. Oh my God, she said. You were injured in combat? Really? Yes, I said. 4 times. Where have you served? She asked. Desert Storm in the 90s, I said. Then 3 tours in Iraq and 3 more in Afghanistan. How long have you been in the military? She asked. A little over 30 years in total, I said. Some of that was in the reserves, but I was mostly on active duty. So your wife was having an affair with my husband while you were out fighting a war? She asked. And he knew what you were doing? Yeah, I said. She shook her head in disbelief. That jerk, she said. He's going to pay for this. We finished breakfast and left. She asked me to call her when I got home, and I promised I would. The meeting with the attorney went smoothly. He listened to my account, reviewed the evidence, including the prenuptial agreement and financial documents I provided. It showed that she earned several $1,000s more as a teacher than I ever did while serving on active duty. Well, this seems like a pretty straightforward case, he said. With the financials and your prenuptial agreement, I believe we can avoid any support payments, especially since she earns about $68,000 a year. That should be sufficient for her to live on in Spokane Valley. The house and property were yours from the start, and the prenuptial agreement clearly states that retirement funds should remain untouched. You'll need to split the bank account, though. I don't see any judge ruling otherwise. We'll aim for the 40% as outlined in the agreement. When would you like her to be served? As soon as possible, I replied. All right, he said. We'll need to arrange for her to be served in Washington, but that's manageable. We handle that frequently. I'll get the paperwork prepared and filed. If everything goes as planned, we could have her served by early next week. I just need the filing fee and my retainer from you now. You can pay the receptionist when you leave. He handed me a sheet of paper. This is a checklist of things you should do to protect yourself, he added. Hopefully, your wife hasn't been able to access the bank yet. I reviewed the list and realized I'd definitely need to visit the bank before heading out. Most of the remaining tasks could be handled online. Any questions? He asked. I shook my head. Not at the moment, I replied. He handed me a card and shook my hand. Feel free to call if you need anything, he said, and good luck. On my way out, I paid the filing fee and a retainer, then headed to my truck. I called John once I was inside. Just finished with my lawyer, I said. I need to stop at the bank, but I'd like to come by and talk about that job you mentioned. I'll be here, Gunny, he replied. Looking forward to seeing you. He sent me directions to the camp after we ended the call. At the bank, I discovered Lisa hadn't touched the account yet, so I withdrew 60% and opened a new account in my name only. I also canceled the joint credit cards after settling the balance and ordered a new ATM card and credit card for myself. Next, I drove to the camp, which was about 35 miles northeast of my house in a straight line. The actual drive was longer, but it was a pleasant day and gave me time to reflect on my situation. In just one day, I'd gone from being a happily married man looking forward to retirement with my wife to discovering I'd been deceived and betrayed for over 20 years. 6 of those years were spent in a war zone, where I risked my life daily. I realized I had handled Lisa's betrayal much like I dealt with combat situations, emotionally detached and resilient. At least Judy was around. I'm not sure how I would have managed all this on my own. I really appreciated her spirit and straightforwardness. Plus, she was incredibly good in bed. I just hoped I wasn't making a mistake by getting involved with her so soon after leaving Lisa. I finally reached the road leading to Camp Rollins. With no traffic on the narrow 2-lane road, I made good time. I arrived at a gate with a small guard shack and stopped. An armed man in camouflage approached my window. "I'm here to see John Sykes," I said. "My name is Alan Roberts." I handed him John's card and my driver's license as instructed. "Just a moment, sir," the guard replied. He inspected my truck and then walked back to the shack. I watched him speak into a field telephone. A couple of minutes later he returned, handing back my license and business card. "Commandant Sykes is expecting you. Welcome to Camp Rollins, Gunny Roberts," he said. I started to thank him, but he had already moved to open the gate. He waved as I drove through, and I waved back. After navigating a few more sharp turns, I arrived at what seemed like a standard military camp. The wooden buildings were neatly arranged around a central paved area where groups of men were either marching or running. The camp was pristine, with well-maintained grounds. I located the camp headquarters and parked in front of it. Upon entering, I was greeted by a striking blonde receptionist in a professional-length skirt. She looked up and smiled as I walked in. "You must be Gunnery Sergeant Roberts," she said. "That's right," I replied. "Welcome to Camp Rollins," she said. "Commandant Sykes is expecting you. Would you like a cup of coffee?" "Yes, please." "That would be great," I answered. "Black, if you don't mind." "Certainly," she replied. "Please go right in." I knocked on the doorway and he gestured me inside while speaking on the phone. I noticed he was wearing a khaki uniform shirt with silver oak leaves indicating his rank. He ended the call and stood up to greet me. "Glad you could make it, Gunny," he said. "Please have a seat." I sat down just as the receptionist brought in my coffee. I thanked her and took a sip. It was exactly what I needed. "I assume you had no trouble finding us." "Not at all. Your directions were spot on," I said. "Great," he replied. "Before we dive deeper, let me give you a bit more insight into the men who come here. Every man who enters through that gate is a victim. They've all been betrayed, and many have endured various forms of abuse. Sometimes it's physical abuse, but almost every man who comes here has suffered emotionally. In some cases, they've faced both physical and emotional abuse, on top of being cuckolded and humiliated." I could relate to that. He went on. "Moreover, these men are often what you might call wimps. I know that term isn't politically correct these days, but I prefer to be straightforward," he said. "Most of the men who come here are weak, both physically and emotionally. Some are also scared and feel they have no other support. Unfortunately, the women they've attached themselves to exploit this vulnerability." "Wow," I said, taken aback. "So what do you do for them?" Our first step is to help them focus and build up their physical strength, John explained. We remove all access to the internet and ban all electronics, cell phones, laptops, tablets, everything. For the 3 months they're here, the internet is non-existent. No email, no Facebook, no YouTube, nothing. I chuckled. I bet that's popular, I said sarcastically. He laughed. Sometimes, he said. Before coming here, some of these guys spent their entire days glued to their cell phones, oblivious to their surroundings. We take that away and force them to face their issues. So, how do they stay in touch with their families? I asked. Good question, John said. We provide them with a post office box address for correspondence. All communication is done through regular mail. We have mail drops in Bonners Ferry and Clark Fork, and mail is delivered twice a week. That's quite a distance for mail, I said. John nodded. We don't want anyone causing trouble by sending people in here, he said. We have armed guards, helicopters, and an electronic security perimeter around the camp. If anyone tries to get in, we'll be aware of it. Has anyone ever attempted a break-in? I asked. There have been attempts, John replied. Fortunately, we've been able to handle the situation. I'll include an unclassified briefing on that in the packet I'm sending home with you. The term handled struck me as intriguing. I wondered what he meant by that. Could you tell me more about the training? I asked. I'll give you a brief overview. Everything is detailed in the packet I'll send home with you. The first month is the toughest for the students, John explained. Besides being cut off from modern electronics and the internet, they undergo intense physical training, similar to the first phase of recruit training. Their day begins at 0500 with réveillé. They double time everywhere, and the instructors are quite demanding. In the second month, we introduce the students to their counselors, John continued. They receive intensive counseling to address their issues, while the physical training continues and self-defense is introduced. In the third month, we ramp up all of this and bring in lawyers to address any legal issues they might have. He glanced at his watch before proceeding. Actually, there's a group session happening right now that you might find interesting, he said. Sure, I agreed. We left his office and headed to another building. He opened the door and gestured for me to go in first. Upon entering, I saw a group of men seated in a semicircle in front of a female counselor. The instructor by the door stood as John entered, nodded at me, and then sat back down. We took seats at the back of the room and watched quietly. One of the students recalled how his wife forced him to serve her lovers, while she laughed and belittled his masculine prowess. He burst into tears, and the students on either side of him patted him on the shoulder, assuring him that he would be fine. I looked at the instructor, a big man with sergeant's stripes on his collar. He sat stoically, taking it all in. I saw his jaw clench in anger as the student began to cry. While the consultant was talking to the student, I decided to join this organization. If there was anything I could do to help these poor people, I would do it. After listening to a few more tips, John waved his hand at me, and we left. He took me around the camp, showing me what they had to offer. From there, we headed to the instructor's hut, a building where instructors gathered to keep up to date with the latest information. There were several men there, all wearing the same khaki shirts as John's. Some wore sergeant's stripes, and some had the rank insignia of a senior sergeant. John gathered them in the main part of the barracks and introduced me to them. We talked for a while, and I learned that about half of them were former Marine drill instructors, while the other half were former Army drill sergeants. From the conversation, it was clear that these men were a close-knit group who genuinely cared about the well-being of their trainees. "So, are you thinking about joining us?" one of them asked. I glanced at John before replying. "As a matter of fact, I am," I said. John smiled and then spoke. "I've asked John to be our new senior instructor," he explained. "He's currently on terminal leave, so it'll be some time before he's here full-time. In the meantime, I want him to spend time here and get to know everyone." The others nodded in agreement. "Welcome aboard, Gunny," one of them said, shaking my hand. The others followed suit. "Thanks," I replied. After that, John and I headed back to his office, discussing the role and the work being done at the camp. "So," John said, "are you in?" I nodded. "I am, John," I confirmed. He smiled and shook my hand. "Welcome aboard," he said. "If you don't mind me asking, what made you decide to join us?" "Hearing that guy in the counseling session," I said. "I never realized things like that really happened. I thought it was just stuff you read about online." "Yeah," John said. "It's a lot more common than most people realize. By the way, I guess I should make you an official offer," he added, laughing. He handed me a piece of paper, and I almost fell over when I saw what the company was offering. A salary far higher than what I made in the Corps, along with an incredible benefits package. Naturally, I accepted. "Great," John said, handing me a stack of binders. "Here's some light reading to keep you busy over the next few weeks." I chuckled. "Feel free to come by any time. You definitely don't want to miss the Burn the Bit H ceremony." "The what?" I asked. "It's something we do at the end of every class," he said. "I think you'll enjoy it." After we said our goodbyes, I took the stack of binders and headed home. The next 3 weeks flew by. Lisa quickly finalized the divorce, signing the papers without contesting anything. My lawyer informed me that my divorce would be official in 30 days. Judy also filed for divorce from Elroy, but hers would take longer, at least 90 days, since she filed in her home state of Washington. I never heard from Lisa again, and honestly, I didn't mind. About 2 weeks after I filed, her parents came by to collect the few things she wanted from the house, along with the rest of her belongings. I handed them a cashier's check for her share of the bank accounts, as well as all the photos that included her. I didn't want anything around that reminded me of her. According to her mother, Lisa was too embarrassed to face me. Somehow that didn't surprise me. On the other hand, Judy spent the last 3 weekends at my place, and we had a great time together. I took her fishing on Lake Pend O'Reilly, and she loved it. Lisa had never been interested in that, but Judy jumped right in, happily cleaning and cooking the kokanee salmon we caught. I made a point of visiting the camp a couple of times a week, checking in with each of the instructors. I found out that all of them were combat veterans and divorced, although a few were pursuing new relationships. I also sat in on several more group counseling sessions, wanting to understand what had brought the students to the camp in the first place. I had to admit, their stories pulled at my heart. I also learned what led to the camp's strict security measures. From what I gathered, a student had been targeted by an organization called MMAS. He had escaped his wife and found refuge at the camp, but the organization was determined to bring him back. They even attempted an armed breach of the camp, but their efforts were stopped, thanks to the camp's guards and a federal agency I hadn't heard of before. As a result, the company implemented new policies stating that the agency would be notified if MMAS was ever mentioned by a prospective student. From what I gathered, the agency had been contacted twice over the past year. Towards the end of the month, John invited me to witness a Burn the Bit H ceremony, which signaled the conclusion of a 3-month course. I donned my Class C uniform and headed out. The ceremony took place at night, and I stood with John, observing from a distance. As I watched, the students from the class pinned pictures of their wives onto a straw effigy, which was then hoisted up and tied to a pole with rope. A pile of wood lay at the base of the pole. One of the students was called forward and handed a lit torch. "Burn the bit, H," commanded the instructor. "Sir, burn the bit, H." "Aye, aye, sir," the student replied, setting the pile of wood on fire. The flames quickly consumed the straw figure, and the students began chanting, "Burn! Burn! Burn!" As the effigy burned, the students erupted into a frenzy, pumping their fists, howling and chanting. When the effigy finally collapsed, they danced, chanted, and some even urinated on the remains. This went on for a while until the effigy was reduced to ashes. "What's the point of all this?" I asked John. "This little ritual gives the men a sense of closure," he explained. "It's a way for them to release what's been bothering them without taking it out on their spouses. Tomorrow they'll graduate, ready to face whatever life throws at them. Just think. 3 months ago they came here as broken men. Tomorrow they'll leave as strong individuals." I could see his point. For a moment I imagined it was Lisa being burned to ashes. The thought brought a smile to my face. "How are things at home?" John asked. "Good," I replied. "The divorce will be finalized in a few days." "And how are you holding up?" he inquired. I nodded. "I'm doing well," I said. "Better than I expected." "Glad to hear that," he said. "I know your terminal leave ends soon." "Yes," I replied. "In 3 days, to be exact." "Excellent," he said. "Then I expect you'll be ready to welcome our new students. They arrive in 4 days. By the way, you'll need these," he added, pulling a small box from his pocket. Inside was a pair of gleaming metal chevrons. "Sergeant Major?" I asked. "Yes," he confirmed. "They signify your position as the senior instructor. Congratulations." "Thank you," I said. "No," he responded with a smile. "Thank you." I spent the next 4 days with Judy. Elroy had offered to buy her out of her share of their house, and she agreed. Apparently he was planning to move Lisa in, and she was eager to leave. I suggested Judy move in with me, and she was happy to accept. So I rented a trailer and moved her things out of their old house and brought them to mine. It would be a bit cramped for a while, but I was confident we could make it work. Judy watched as I got ready for my first full day at the camp, then prepared a breakfast fit for royalty. She handed me a thermos of coffee and kissed me as I left the house. "Go get 'em, Tiger," she said with a smile. "I will," I replied, kissing her back. I didn't know where things would go with Judy, but I was open to seeing how it developed. So far, she had filled the gap left by Lisa, and I couldn't remember feeling this content in a long time. When I got to the camp, I headed to receiving. I checked myself in the mirror, adjusted my campaign cover, and stepped out onto the porch overlooking the group of men standing on the footprints below. "Oh, my God," I shouted, staring at the small group. "How on earth do they expect me to turn these guys into men when they won't even send me proper human beings to start with? This is the sorriest bunch of illiterate idiots I've ever laid eyes on. Unbelievable." I turned to the sergeant handling the new recruits. "Get this pathetic lot out of my sight and into processing before I lose my temper." "Yes, Sergeant," he replied, then led the group away. After they left, I turned around to see John standing there, grinning from ear to ear. "Well done," he said. "Welcome to Camp Rollins.